Figured since we have a legal mind on here, I'm not sure what the billable hours policy is right now for podcasting. Um,
The clock's running. That's all I
the
know.
clock's
So
running,
just
yeah.
take
So
your
I think
time.
let's get into some of the topics facing me. Besides the charges the casino just formally filed this morning, we're going to talk about that on a separate call. Get Rudy in on that one. I want to make sure we got the full brain trust. Um, so I was curious, actually, Ronald Raygun. So you're an immigration lawyer. I think you're probably well exposed to the panoptic nature of the immigration enforcement apparatus. And I wanted to ask, as a legal mind, is the panopticon or panopticism something that you've come across as like an idea? And is it something we could potentially talk about? Have you heard about this? Jeremy Bentham, prison designer.
I don't even know that word that you're saying. What is that word? Am I
It's
am
I'm
I dumb?
vaguely familiar with it. Isn't it? It's about like a prison architecture.
Prison
Right?
architecture, yeah. So it was like a utilitarian philosopher, Jeremy Bentham, in I think the 18th century designed this. This one was built in France, and basically the way it,
Are you regretting having me on already?
no, not at all, not at all. We're gonna get into all kinds of like lawyer jokes in a little bit here. Don't worry. We're gonna bring it back down. But like this is the
Okay.
part. Like Night Rule is kind of like a little party. So the way I like to start a party, to be a good host, generally in real life, back when parties were a thing. I'm not sure if that might be civilizational lost
Mhm.
knowledge at this point. But I always like to bring up a really deep and interesting philosophical question, just to put everyone a little like make everyone a little uncomfortable because they're like, oh
It's
shit, like are we here to
it's
talk
an
about this
alpha
shit? Like what the
it's an
fuck?
alpha it's an alpha move. You're just trying to
Yeah, it's true.
you're swinging it around, showing off your vocab.
Anyways, no, but
Making me
seriously,
okay.
you're the first lawyer that's been on the podcast. Okay, so I've got like
Uh-huh.
this pent up thing. Okay, so the Panopticon was a prison where you built a big ring, and all the cells are on the outside of this big ring, right? And then in the
Sure.
middle, you have a guard tower, and the guard tower can rotate. So it's basically a mechanism to be able to view the prisoners more efficiently, so you can employ fewer guards because you just have this centralized watchtower, and then they're all on the outside. But what they found was that because the prisoners didn't know when they were being watched and when they weren't being watched, they would assume that they were always potentially being watched, and over years they would like literally lose their minds, and they all would like become deeply insane and deeply troubled from this. And then
Hmm.
cultural theorists use this as a metaphor to say that culture and politics and society can be panoptic. Like a feminist scholar would say there's a panoptic nature to the way like patriarchy views women, and their women feel like they're always being watched and they need to self-modulate their own behavior. And it's kind of this idea of like the legal apparatus being like so kind of undifferentiated that it actually has this like profoundly weird and deep effect on like the human psyche.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, is like from someone who's actually been on the ground. You're an immigration lawyer, obviously. I'm sure you've worked a lot of different cases. You've worked with a lot of people that have probably kind of been under the brunt of various state apparatuses. And like, does that affect their psychology, you think, in unpredictable and bizarre ways?
Oh yeah, for sure. And actually, I've been doing this for about 10 years, but it was last year I had this case that really I think highlights this point that you're making. So there's certain types of removal defenses where you have to prove in order to avoid deportation that the kids or the spouse or the parent, if they have legal status, will suffer some sort of extreme hardship if the foreign national is deported, and it has to be above and beyond what you would normally expect from a deportation. And so we had this case with only one qualifying relative, and she was a teenage daughter. She was born in the United States. She was like 18, about to go off to college. No major medical issues, the kinds of things that you would normally, um, look for in a case like this. And so we were sort of grasping at straws. We had her go do a mental health evaluation with the forensic mental health evaluator. And it came back that when her mom was arrested by ICE the first time, first and only time, the mom was going to school to drop off this girl who was like 11 at the time. And so they pulled her over, they arrested her, and then ICE took her to school and dropped her off, having just taken the mom, who was this a single mother. Not that it would really matter if she was happily married, it's still just as bad. And the evaluator, I think, did a good job of teasing this out and showing how this had really stunted certain aspects of her development. She was overly dependent on her mother in a way that you wouldn't normally expect to see for somebody her age. She was, afraid to be alone, or for her mom to be alone. Things that, I mean, of course, right? And so, even though I've done this for a long time, it didn't even really occur to me to look under that rock. It's obvious now in retrospect, but and I have other clients who have been in removal proceedings for 5 or 6 years, and these are people who are on the radar, so they know they have hearings coming up, or they have regular check-ins with ICE, and I can see how it's just it wears on people. It really wears them down. And then even for people who are off the radar, people who don't have hearings or anything, we get a lot of questions that are very, very on the one hand, they seem paranoid, but on the other hand, they're perfectly rational when you consider the types of real threats that exist. So there will be rumors that go around that ICE is at Walmart, right? And don't go to Walmart. There's a Facebook groups where these things get passed around, or what happens if I get $5 in food stamps for my child? People have an idea that the government is all just one big thing, and if my kids get food stamps, all of a sudden there's a black helicopter that's going to swoop in and we'll all be arrested. And so it's a weight that I try to understand, but I don't think I can totally understand.
Yeah, it's probably true. Like for me too. Like I mean, I've led a pretty comfortable life. I don't think I've ever been in a situation where like there was a state apparatus that was just this ungeneralized, omnipresent potential kind of threat always on the horizon. Um, you know, it makes me think of like how things like again like a say like an immigration system, or the laws around immigration, or law enforcement in general, and the state apparatuses and the legal apparatuses, but also there's people like you. We have this adversarial legal system with defense and prosecution, and like to what extent as an immigration lawyer would you say is you've got these laws and law enforcement that are kind of dehumanizing people, and then a defense attorney like yourself is actually going to come in and try and humanize the people for in front of a judge to say, look, these are actually people and this is their story, and this is, you see it from their perspective. Like, is it fair to say that that's a pretty huge component of like what you do, or am I way off base there?
No, for sure. I mean, that's a lot of what we do is storytelling and trying to tell the story of our clients, where they're from, what their family life was like growing up, the kinds of things that they do, and what motivates them. And then, at least in the removal context, you're trying to put the judge in the position where he gets to be the hero of the story, right? Like, you get to right this wrong that could happen, or you get to be the one who makes this right. And so, and you want to think that the judges are, fair arbiters or following the law in a consistent way. And at the end of the day, you start to see they're just not. And you have to learn sort of their individual characteristics and the things that the judges really care about or want to see, and learn to tailor your case to the particular judge that you have. But yeah, that's a huge part of it. And especially since like typically if you're in removal proceedings, this isn't always the case, but you've got some sort of criminal history, some sort of encounter, and there's huge numbers of people, including, liberal Democrats who think like, well, yeah, he's got kids and he's, worked here for 20 years, but he did a DUI. And so, he shouldn't have done, he
So
shouldn't.
So the penalty for that ought be exile, like
Right.
Roman Empire style.
Right.
Yeah.
And if he didn't want to be in this situation,
Shouldn't have drag and drop.
shouldn't have DUI'd. And so, and I'm not pro DUI, but I will say most of those liberal Democrats or judges have probably DUI'd.